What is going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Afzal Hussain. You can find out a bit more about me through the social media links below, or you can check out my website, which is www.afzalhussain.com. In today's video, it's going to be a quick one. We are going to be talking about whether you should take a gap year after university, or is it better to go straight into the world of work and do a grad scheme? The reason I'm answering this question is because a lot of students email me and ask me this question. As much as I encourage students to do experiences and travel and make the most of their time after university, I do personally think you are at a disadvantage in terms of getting into the world of banking and finance if you take a gap year and travel, or take a gap year and do teaching or learning another language. Because end of the day, if you just compare your CV with an individual who did the internships, say you did the internships as well, and then you both graduate and they join a grad scheme at a investment bank or a asset management firm or any banking and finance corporation, and they do a year or two there, whereas you go and travel the world, and so you have that gap. You might say it's not a gap on your CV, but it will be a gap in work experience, or a gap in relevant work experience to the finance world. And so naturally, if you're both in your third year or your second year after university, and it comes to applying for a role which you're both interested in, and it's at a top bank or even a boutique, immediately the candidate who has previous experience in the financial services will stand out. Obviously, part of it is subjective because it depends on whose desk your CV lands on, because reviewing a CV is very subjective. Oftentimes when you apply to a role, your CV ends up on the desk of either the analyst or the associate or the VP or the MD of that team, and they might see it and they might think, okay, they went traveling, cool, they learned this language, blah blah blah, let's give them a shot. It's worthwhile giving this candidate an interview. Whereas others might be, for the most part, might be like, okay, this candidate has a lot more experience, relevant experience, they've spent time in the financial services industry as opposed to going and traveling and not doing anything relevant, and so let's invite them for an interview. So there is a risk to taking a gap year to travel. Obviously, careers are very, very long. You know, you're going to be working for 40 to 50 years, and so taking a year out or 2 years out to travel and experience, you know, the rest of the world, it's a great experience and I highly encourage it. But when it comes to applying for roles in the financial services, it might be a bit trickier to break in. And so what you might have to do is apply to back office roles, or roles that are easier to break into. And so you will have to play the long game. And that comes at the expense of you having your great experience of your gap year. So it's something to think about. It's something to consider. It's not impossible. It's not, black and white. There's definitely a gray area. But I think if you have strong insight weeks and internships throughout university, and you've built kind of a good track record throughout your time at university, then it would help your case when it comes to applying for grad schemes or alternative roles after you've experienced life outside of university for a year or two. Alternatively, another option is, let's say candidate A and candidate B both graduated at the same time. Candidate A spends 2 years in the industry while you were traveling. So that's 2 years out of the industry. 2 years out of the industry, 2 years in the industry. And so it's been 3 years since you graduate, and they are applying for a role that you're also interested in. They might get that role. You might need to apply for a more junior role. So if you do go and travel the world, or you take a gap year, you might need to accept the fact that when it comes to applying for a role after a year or two, your peers would be in more senior positions and you would have to apply for more junior positions. End of the day, your first 10 years of your career are there for you to find your feet. Don't worry about seniority and where your peers are at. What's most important is to make sure you are fulfilled and happy in your career and doing something that you are interested in and passionate about. So if that means taking a gap year and doing whatever you want to do that. But the outcome, or when it comes to applying for a job, might mean you have to apply for a more junior role as opposed to a more senior role. Another option that you can do is graduate, make sure you get a grad scheme, do a year or two, and then go traveling. Do a year, take a year out, and a lot of people actually do this. Take a year out and then come back into the industry, because that kind of gives that stamp of approval that, you know, you've spent a few years in the industry, you're just taking a year out and you're going to come back. So that's an option. And if you really want to kind of give yourself the stamp of approval, you can do 1 year and go on a gap year, but on top of that have CFA under your belt. So if you've got CFA level 1, 2 and 3 under your belt, you can take a gap year, come back. People know, okay, they've got CFA. They know their stuff when it comes to investing. This is specific for more asset management type roles because CFA is relevant for asset management and fund management in general. So if you've got that type of qualification under your belt, then you can follow that route. If you go on a gap year and you start applying for graduate scheme roles and you struggle to get in, you can always consider doing a master's. Obviously, if you can finance that, that's great. You can do a master's and that will buy you time. So when you're doing your master's, you can be applying for grad schemes, and that way it's easier to get into a grad scheme as opposed to coming from a gap year background. So that's also another option. Hopefully that answers the questions that many of you have been sending to me. And if you've got any other questions, make sure you leave them in the comments below. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like so it can reach a broader audience and more young people, students and graduates. And if you are subscribed, thank you, and turn on post notifications so you never miss an upload. That's it from me this week, and I will see you next week with a new video. Peace. Every year when the academic year starts, I tour. So last year I toured the UK, going to different universities regardless of their ranking within the league tables and talking to them about everything to do with securing Insight Weeks, internships and grad schemes at the best investment banks in the world, the best consulting firms, professional service firms. So it's literally where I travel the UK and talk to university students and societies and help them help themselves, really. If you're interested in being part of my university tour 2019-2020, drop an email to info@afzalhussain.com and put the subject university tour, and I'll hopefully be seeing you at your university in September onwards. So if you're interested, do drop me an email.